This week on Ryan and Megan, we give the advice to have kids, but don't stop traveling. We're going to discuss kind of what we do, what others do, and what you should do.
Welcome into episode number 20 of Ryan and Megan. We are two traveling physical therapists. We traveled right out of school as a couple, and then now we are traveling with our two children. And today we're discussing how to make that transition. We are going to share what we did, also what we've learned from other couples who have done it, and then hopefully what you can do as well. So let's get into it. But before we do, please consider leaving a 5-star review for the podcast wherever you're listening to help push us along and get these episodes out to you. We are going to be kind of, I guess, starting a little like series type thing on traveling and the ins and outs of making that transition to traveling with a family.
Yeah, we seem to meet a lot of different couples who, it's fun to team travel. So there's a lot of great solo travelers out there. And if you're listening to this, I think it'll even be pertinent to you because most people want to meet someone. And a lot of times when we meet other couples who travel, they eventually want to transition to having kids. Mm-hmm. We think kids are great. We think they're awesome. We think you shouldn't delay having kids because they really are a blessing. Mm-hmm. It just adds a couple more variables on there and makes it, I think, more difficult if we're being honest. But it is doable. There's just more things you got to think about. And so a lot of times people really push off having kids because, travel is so awesome and so great. But I don't think you have to, I think you can travel, have some fun. But then if you're a couple and you're thinking, okay, I think it's time for us to have kids, I think it's possible. And so we're going to kind of talk about that transition because going from, I know for us, two travelers going, having much of fun, and then now we want to have kids. How do we do that and still travel, especially like the delivery part?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a big question, and there's not a lot of people out there doing it because it does present more challenges, and it's very easy to want to step back and go back into the comfort zone of just what everybody else does, and what everybody else does is not bad. It's just we're pretty deep into doing the unconventional things.
We see the benefits of travel so much that when we considered going back permanent, even for a short time, it was just really hard to give up some of those awesome things we've come accustomed to with travel, like freedom of our time, more money, adventure, getting to go see cool things. And so it was really hard to get like in the mindset to go back to that. Not that you can't do that. I think that's definitely an option. Mm-hmm. But here's some ways that we did it and how you can kind of navigate that transitional period of going from a couple to having a baby. And then on the other end, now we're traveling as a family.
Yeah. So today we're discussing specifically the things that you have to consider in that that transition part where you are literally delivering your new baby. So the things you need to consider is like the doctor visits before having the baby, delivering the baby, and then an adjustment period afterwards. And our question is, how do you get through that period in and of itself without stopping travel?
While still traveling.
Mm-hmm. So first we're just going to share what we did, and then we'll kind of get into some other things that other couples have done that could work as well. And so what we did was we knew that we kind of wanted a home base when we started our family, and we have all of our family, like our parents, that live in one central area, and the area is very conducive to being able to take contracts there because it's a big city.
I think that first part that you said, that we had the feeling of wanting to be around family and kind of creating a home base there and delivering there is very common. I think most people feel that. And so we're just very fortunate that our family all lives in one place, or most of them, our parents do. So the grandparents to be.
Mm-hmm.
And then we also live near a big city in Missouri.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a lot more travel options. Obviously, things get a little tougher when you live in a rural area. You know, you might only have one little local hospital. They might not ever have any travelers, or if your family is separate. But I will say a majority of people, they kind of want to be close to someone. So maybe that's one side of the family. And then you're also kind of looking at where are travel contracts.
Mm-hmm. So that is a good thing to consider if you're trying to pick which family to be close to, if yours are not together, but you know that you do want to be around some family for the delivery. You might by default have to pick the family that has more travel contracts available or is in a bigger city.
And this would be common for people who are permanent also, kind of have kids, is a lot of times that's when you're having considerations. Do we live near my parents as a married couple? Do we move near my parents now that we're having kids, because they're going to be wanting to see the grandkids? So those are even things that I think is just a normal part of life. But now as a traveler, you're kind of planning for and choosing what to do.
Yeah. So we decided our decision was to go back home around St. Louis, and we ended up going probably 5 or 6 months before our delivery, just to make sure that our care was established and we had a plan. I would say you probably want to be at your final destination at least 3 months before delivery so that you can do your third trimester already being set up and taken care of in that regard. And I think most medical offices would like that as well.
Yeah, some of them won't take you once you're already in your third trimester.
It might just be harder to get into one.
They say that they probably will take you, but just something to think about.
I mean, there's always people who are real laid back, like you're going to have a baby either way. So the option is always like you're delivering, you go to the ER and have the baby. But, you know, we wanted to be a little bit more prepared than that. So we knew we were coming home. And the first step in that was to find a contract at home, because we knew we wanted to keep trying to travel. So taking a permanent job was not really on the table for us, but we had found our location where we wanted to go. And the next job was to find the contract.
And I will say, looking for travel contracts was the way we wanted to attempt this, because again, we wanted to keep traveling. There was the option of something a little less time sensitive, but more permanent. So that would be like going PRN in the area. If you have enough hours to pick up, but PRN, then you could start it and work it for as much as you want, and then go back into travel. And then of course there's the option of, okay, like 1 year permanent somewhere, wherever your home base is.
Which honestly, that would be a reasonable timeline for taking a permanent job.
Yeah.
1 year, especially if you want to be home 6 months before the baby. And then you usually need a period to get used to
about 6 months after
stuff.
Yeah.
So about 6 months after. So if you don't have travel contracts, but you can find a job to take you for a year, it's not a bad idea.
It's not a bad idea. PRN, but we chose travel, and we just happen to live in a very fortunate place where there's plenty of hospitals, plenty of clinics, home health. So we found a contract. At that time, both of us took contracts. We were both working for our first daughter. And what was nice about the travel contract, I would say, over PRN, is you weren't battling for hours. You signed a contract and you were kind of locked in for 3 months. Most places are in need of therapists, so you can kind of lock it in for maybe a little bit longer, 6 months, and then re-up. And then we had some security with that over the PRN, I would say. Mm-hmm. We were making travel money. And then also you had the benefits of the travel company. So if you go PRN, you know, you're not going to get those benefits most of the time, depending on how many hours you do. But that seemed to work out really well for us to do that. Now, we were in our tax home, and we have tons of videos about tax homes and about how we travel locally. But just a caveat, that money that we earned, the travel money, we couldn't take our free tax-free stipends everything had to be taxed, but we were okay with that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we found where we wanted to be. We found the job. And then the next kind of decision for us to make was whether or not to buy a house, because we were not living in our RV at home. We actually went back to staying with my grandparents. We stayed with them while we were still in school, finishing that up. So that was kind of our like intermittent housing area. And I really wanted to buy a house just because I wanted some roots. I wanted something that was ours, that I could put baby gear in.
Home base.
That was a home base. I wanted probably some of those instincts kicking in of just wanting a place that I felt like was stable for the baby and for us. It was kind of nice in that regard to have that. I mean, not necessary to have a house of your own to be able to nest and do things like that, but your maternal instincts do kick in and you want to make sure, that you have a good welcoming place to bring the baby where you feel comfortable and confident. So Ryan was a little bit hard to convince on the housing front. And I think that was a good thing.
When we had our first daughter, all we had was Big Betty, which that's what we call our motorhome that we renovated. And it's really built for a couple. There would have been no way to have a baby in it, even if my naive brain maybe at that time was like, well, I think we can do it. But as we got closer, I was like, we can't do it. We did not have the RV that we currently sit in, which we have a travel trailer with the bunkhouse or bunk room. I think it would be doable in this, definitely. So if you're out there and you have a RV or you're considering that, and maybe the housing market in your area just doesn't look that great, then this could definitely be an option if you plan on traveling in an RV later, like once you leave.
Mm-hmm.
So I think this would have been okay with us. Still kind of tough. And even at that time, I was like, I didn't want to buy a house because the housing market was not good at that time. And, but looking back on it, it was actually not bad, not as bad as it is now.
Yeah.
And, it was totally worth it. But we went into buying a house. What got me on board is we went into buying a house with very specific parameters.
Mm-hmm. And that's because we knew we wanted to keep the option of continuing to travel open after having a kid. And that meant that we couldn't have too high of expenses at home. So Ryan's whole mindset was that if we get a house and now we have to pay for it, it's putting down a root and it's tying some of our money and our assets to this area. And if it ties too much of it down, we're not going to have the flexibility in our money to be able to travel.
Yeah, that's a really great way to explain it. And so one of the main things that we were looking for in a house was we wanted a separate entry to the basement, and I needed to be able to transfer that basement into a livable apartment or something we could rent out. Nothing crazy. A lot of people on Airbnb, and if you're a solo traveler, you've rented rooms in homes, but I wanted a space where the traveler could rent the basement. We could keep it blocked off from the top level where we would live. And then I could rent out the basement and cover most of my mortgage, or in this case, all of my mortgage, for those monthly rents, because then that frees up our money for traveling.
Right. So that was our solution to making sure that we weren't tying up too much of our money. So you might come up with a different solution for yourself. You might be able to get a low enough payment, or you might be in another profession that makes a little bit higher weekly when you are traveling. So you might be able to handle higher expenses, or, you can figure out what works for you,
or even you don't have to necessarily have a separate unit like we do. We have it designed that way because we go back to our house often to visit family, since both of our families live in St. Louis and it's easy to fly into. So we go back often, and then we have our own house to stay at, and then we can keep a renter the whole time. But you could also, keep one room for you locked up, and then you could rent out your house when you're out on contract, especially if you're not planning on coming back too often.
Mm-hmm.
That's definitely an option.
Yeah, because I know not everywhere has basements. Alternatively, you could look at a separate entry attic. Sometimes there's like outside entry attics with rentable
over the garage.
spaces.
Yeah, you see them all the time on Furnish Finder. So that's what we wanted. That's what we did. We ended up buying a house, and it was really good for us because it kind of gave us a home base that wasn't an RV. And but there's other options there. That's just what we did.
Yeah. So kind of in essence, that's basically what we did. We bought the house. I think we got it in September or October, and our daughter was born in February. So we had a couple months to kind of get it ready and move in. We obviously didn't own anything to furnish it because we hadn't had a house or apartment before, nothing in storage. So it was nice to have that time frame to get things ready. So we weren't doing that after we had our daughter. And then we stayed home for 6 months after she was born to give us a nice adjustment period before trying our first contract. And this second time around with our second daughter, we only were home for 3 months. And that was a little bit faster of a transition than we really wanted because we felt comfortable with that 6 month adjustment period the first time. And we've done okay. I think maybe if it was our first child, it would have been a lot harder to go that early. But just know you'll probably want some time afterwards to get used to things.
Yeah, just getting used to being parents for the first time, getting used to, especially if you're near family, allowing them to see your kid and interact with them when they're so young because they change so quickly. And that just, that's just one less thing you're juggling, learning how to be parents while also then traveling, which is a lifestyle of a constant change. So yeah, I agree that 6 months is, I think, kind of the sweet spot.
And how we did that was just negotiated extensions in Ryan's contract because once the babies were born, well, I guess it was the first time, was the only time I was working. So once Reagan was born, my contract ended. Ryan negotiated into his contract taking time off for paternity leave, which is not paid because we're travelers.
Highly suggested, though. So I think I took off 2 to 3 weeks, and essentially I just wrote it into my travel contract with them and said, hey, when my wife's pregnant, whenever she delivers, then I want that to start my 2 to 3 weeks off. They were very accommodating for that. So it might
you
not
just have to save for that.
Might not work for that place, but make sure you ask. And then, we saved up some money. So, because we weren't going to be getting a paycheck for those few weeks, but totally worth it to do.
Yeah. Anything else about what we did?
No, that's good. I mean, I think you really got to consider there's going to be a lot more visits leading up to delivery. You're going to want to be somewhere. Don't just find the nearest emergency room to deliver. You're going to need care afterwards. There's going to be visits for a baby and mom afterwards and at that hospital. And you want a good connection with someone. Mm-hmm. And then even after the 6 months, you're going to have doctor's appointments up to like 2. But they kind of start spacing out a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you've kind of adjusted the things. So you might not be as nervous that, every single thing that pops up. Yeah. So let's transition into talking about what some other full-time travelers, what we've heard that their plan is or what they have done, and kind of just what we've brainstormed you could do to help get you through that delivery period if you don't really want to go back to, if you don't have like a home base or like a city to go back to, if you don't want to buy a house, if you're still totally just like, I'm traveling now and I am staying in this travel spot and I'm going to travel afterwards, kind of how does that look?
Yeah, if you don't really have a location to go back to, I think this would actually fall more into, maybe you come from a small rural town. There's obviously no travel contracts there, or you can't decide which family you want to go set roots up to, or you're just not ready to set roots. Then what we would say is pick some location that you feel like you can have a good travel contract for an extended period of time. that also has a hospital that you feel comfortable with delivering at, and you kind of create a pseudo home base there. Not buy a house there, but like create a pseudo home base there. I mean, I guess you could buy a house there, create it a rental, but you're
Yeah, you
just
could.
kind of finding someplace that you can really do an extended travel contract, so you can have a place to go deliver the baby.
I think in this case, it would be really important to do a good interview with your contract before you take it. Kind of, we have videos on like what kind of questions to ask. Just really be diligent on that so that you can kind of get a good feel as to whether the contract is going to be enjoyable for you or not. And then see if you can get them to agree to an extended amount of time. Usually we do say just take 3 months at a time and then extend. And we have even done that at home when we were delivering. But, in this case, it can be nice to know that I have a contract all the way up until delivery, or I have a contract all the way up until a couple months afterwards. And that can just give you a little bit of peace of mind. There's always the option of them canceling your contract early. That doesn't happen often, I wouldn't say, in our experience. So this might be a case where you want to agree to an extended contract longer than normal so that you have that locked down.
Right. Our personal friends who recently had a baby, they did this. So around their family, not many travel contracts, nothing they could score long term. So they picked an area. They decided to, okay, we're going to deliver here. So they went there. They actually ended up buying a house there, fixed it up because they knew they weren't going to stay there, but they could then rent the house later, and have that be part of their portfolio. But while they were delivering, they would have a house to stay in instead of their RV. So they actually went there. They got all set up, and then they actually negotiated a contract where the husband was there for 12 months. So like a full year contract, or maybe just a little bit less than that. And that's okay. I know there's the tax home rule of don't work greater than 12 months in a 24-month period. So after they burn that year, they can't go back to that general area for another 12 months. Otherwise, their tax home moves there if they don't want their tax home to move there. But they were able to take full travel stipends while they were there delivering the baby.
Yeah, that's nice.
And that gave them a good security of, okay, we're going to be here 6 months before delivery. When we deliver, we're going to be here 6 months after. And so, yeah, that is one of those situations where signing an extended contract, even if it's 6 months and then you're going to re-up and that kind of gets you through the delivery, is probably wise to do.
Another option is getting the contract through the delivery date and then just saving some money for time off for both of you afterwards, however long you want that to be. So if you want it to be a couple weeks or a couple months, and then when you're comfortable finding the next contract, if you have the flexibility and the ability to do that in your finances, then do it. And it's probably also a good idea to maybe put back, if this is your situation, put back a little bit money into kind of like a separate emergency fund. Like if you know that you're close to delivering and your contract were to get canceled, it would be really hard to pick up and move and go to a whole new location when you're weeks or days away. And so you want to know that you've got the security of like, if the worst scenario happened where I lost my income and I needed to stay here because you can't get away when you're about to deliver, do I have provisions to be able to do that? That would probably be
having a fully funded emergency fund is always wise, even just if you're just traveling, because you never know when things are going to cancel or you have a hard time finding a job in an area. So having that will give some peace of mind. But yeah, that third option that you're speaking of is working a contract up to your delivery date and then know that you're going to take an extended time off. So your contract ends after the delivery,
Mm-hmm.
and then maybe even you don't even stay in that area. Maybe you go to your small town where your family's at, and you get to kind of live there. Now you're not going to be making any money or anything, but maybe you get to spend a little bit more time with family, and you kind of take advantage of that time to really rest and recover.
Mm-hmm.
And then you find you a new contract wherever you want.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you're thinking about like how to kind of get ready for the baby when you're in a place that is not your own, that is why it can be nice to have a little bit of time before the baby comes. You can still get rental areas or rooms or apartments set up for a baby. And we were sharing with somebody over the trip that, there's a lot of baby gear out there and you don't need it all. Really, all you need is diapers, you need clothes, you need food, and you need a place for the baby to sleep that's safe. Everything else, you can usually find a way around. Sterilizers, you don't necessarily have to have. There
Don't
are
necessarily
like
need bottle
microwave
warmers.
ways to sterilize.
Yeah, there's tons of baby gear. There's tons of fear mongering with the baby gear. But get what you want.
They need
Don't
love.
necessarily need everything. So just kind of really consider, do we need this? Do we want to lug this around?
Yeah. And then again, when you're considering time off after the baby, even when you're, away from home, you could also still negotiate that into your contract, too. So
I hope this kind of covers the transition period. I think this is the period that couples who are thinking about having kids, it worries them the most because it just feels so daunting that you feel like, well, that's just going to end travel right in its tracks. And everyone's different, so you really got to self-evaluate on how you're going to do with it. But we're here to say, have kids. It doesn't mean that you have to stop travel. It just means you have to be creative. And as people who travel and do the unconventional already, you have that inside you. You just need to take the time and consider what we're saying, because we're going to give you those things that you got to think about. But it is totally doable. You just might have to be a little creative.
Yeah. Yeah. If you're already traveling, you're already used to all the change. It does get harder with a kid. And so, like you said, just considering what you're going to need to look at, consider your options, plan what you think is going to work for you, and then just give it a try.
Yeah. It doesn't mean, just considering and being creative doesn't mean that if you get to a point where like you and your spouse are saying, this just travel stuff isn't working for us personally, we've tried these creative ways or we've considered these creative ways, you always have the option to, okay, we're just not going to travel for this short amount of time, or we're going to stop travel, and that's okay too. Another
thing to always keep on the table is the fact that you could stop traveling. And this whole episode is about, have babies keep traveling because we think it's possible. But we also think that travel gives you the flexibility to reevaluate consistently and figure out what's working for you. And kind of like you alluded to earlier, if it's just not working, or if it's a transition period, you need time to adjust or something, it is still an option to stop travel, and that doesn't have to be indefinite either.
Right.
But I think for the health of, I think you do have to prioritize the health of your family, the health of your marriage, the health of your mentality and emotions, especially women after giving birth, going through so many different hormonal changes and men and women, complete changes to your whole entire life and routine. That is a lot to adjust to. Even though travelers are used to adjusting to a lot, this is a massive change to your life. We think it's great, but it is a massive change. So you're going to be going through emotional and mental challenges that you might never have thought you would ever deal with, or it might not be your personality to respond to something the way that you do. Just so much has changed. It can be hard to predict. So I think coming in with a plan is really helpful.
Mm-hmm.
And then always both of you staying open to prioritizing your family's health first and saying, if we just need to stop, we can take a break. We can reevaluate. Because I think that's the most important thing is.
Or I think what you were talking about, how you pre-plan a travel pause, because that's the great thing about travel. It's so flexible that if you go permanent for a year and a half, whatever you need, travel will still be there when that year gets over. And let me tell you, when you have a kid, a year goes by very quickly.
Yeah.
You'll look up and you're like, oh, okay, wow, a year happened. And so if it works better for you and you feel more comfortable, looking at doing a permanent job for 1 year, my only suggestion would be I would come in with a plan and I would put a end date on it. So if you go in with I'm just going to go back to perm and we'll see how it feels, that's okay to, if you need to adjust once that year date comes, but make sure there's a date where you reevaluate, because otherwise you'll just kind of keep going and it'll get comfortable. I'm telling you, and it's harder to go back to travel because everyone gets comfortable where you're at. Even if you're on a travel contract, you get comfortable where you're at, and then to move to the next one kind of feels like you're ripping off a Band-Aid. So if 1 year, I think that would be a perfect timeline. You put a little pause on travel, but you have an end date at the end of that year. We're going to look at reconsidering. And I would even say challenge yourself to, if we truly wanted to travel a year ago, let's just take a contract after this end date. We'll just go ahead and plan for it. We'll try it. And then if it doesn't work, we'll go right back to our permanent job. But most likely it'll be awesome.
Yeah. And coming in with a re-entry to travel plan, just like we were saying, we wanted to buy a house, but we didn't want it to stop us from traveling. So if that's you looking at buying a house and you're going to go to a permanent job for a year, just consider making sure it's not going to stop you from being able to try it in the future. So anyway.
All right. Well, if you are interested in becoming a traveler, maybe you're just listening to this and maybe you're ready to become a traveler. Maybe you already have a family and you're like, okay, well, if Ryan and Megan can travel with a family, I want to join in. And you need travel recruiter recommendations. We would love to share the recruiters who we personally work with. Just look down in the description below, whether you're listening on your podcast or watching here on YouTube. Look down in the description. There will be a link there that says recommended recruiters. Fill out that link, fill out that form on our website. That just gets us to know you a little bit better, and then we will get you connected with our recruiters.
Yes. And you want to do what's been good, what's been poopy?
Yeah, sure.
Our last ending segment.
Think. I will say my what's been good. What's been good, or I'll start with poopy. What's been poopy is all the people who say that having kids is tough and then adding in traveling it's tough. They're kind of right in a certain sense. There's more to juggle. But what's good is that there's so much life that gets brought into having kids and then being able to take them on your travels. The tough part, the poopy part, is just the technicality that you're a parent and you have to adjust to that, and that you have to think about them more than you normally would. But that's the exact same stuff that you would have had to done if you were a permanent employee. You're just adding in the fact that you're moving around every 3 months. Mm-hmm. And so there's more logistics to think about, but go through the logistics slowly. It's possible. And the kids will bring so much joy. And for years to come. We're barely at the beginning of it. Our oldest is 2 years old. We have a 7-month-old, and we don't regret starting our family when we did.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think for anybody out there who knows that they want to have kids, just do it. Don't delay it. Don't put it off. They bring joy. They bring, I'm going to throw a big word in there, sanctification. They're going to make you learn new things, become a better person, practice skills. And it's just like the best form of sacrificial love. It's so fulfilling. It's so great. So I think
that's your good too.
That's my good. It is so great. And it's fun. Our oldest is starting to get to the stage where she's like communicating more and can understand more. So we're coming up on Easter today. I was telling them the Easter story and trying to teach her like what Easter really was about and telling it in a story form. And that's a fun way for me to remind myself of stories too and learn it over again, and watching them learn is so fun. And I can't think of a poopy.
That's okay. That's okay. All righty. That is it for this episode. Thank you for listening. As always, consider hitting that subscribe button here on YouTube, or continue following our podcast on wherever you listen to podcasts. We will keep releasing episodes, and hopefully they're really helpful. This is kind of the start of some family content with that we're going to kind of put out. Won't be everything. We'll hop back into just kind of general travel therapy stuff, and then our travels that we're doing. But hopefully you enjoyed this video. And until next time, see ya.